Hey, thank you, Jen. What a wonderful introduction. I'm so glad to be a part of this because you guys are doing exactly what I think we all ought to be doing, and living in a well-examined life. And to me, that's made a huge amount of difference. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit of my story, and hopefully it will be inspiring that you can ask some questions. And if we want to dialogue about some of this, feel free to do that. I'm going to share a few pictures of just the kind of work that I do. This is, I'm a sculptor, and I've been making welded sculpture ever since I was about 10 years old, and just grew up with this activity. Sort of, I never thought about it so much as making art as I did just being a kid, just living. And I was able to lead this pretty successful career in the last century. I got quite a bit of exposure and did some projects that took me around the world and got me introduced to a lot of absolutely fascinating people, like, for instance, Archbishop Tutu here. I kind of got a reputation doing these bronze sculptures as awards for peace prizes and that sort of thing. Did one for the UN. I did one for the Physicians for Social Responsibility. I'm trying to get I can't get this strip off the right-hand side, but this was a project that was done for the Tiananmen Square massacre in '89. A bronze piece called China Peace. And it was kind of used as a diplomatic gift by some of the students who had escaped from the Tiananmen Square catastrophe and came to the US and started this organization to get the news back into China about what had really happened. And it turned into what they call the first facts revolution in history. It's a pretty amazing story, because what they did was they wrote a narrative with photos of the massacre and sent it into random fax numbers all over China. And so people were getting these, essentially the news coming through the fax machine all over, in offices all over the country. And of course, the Chinese government was trying to suppress this. Anyway, these are the kinds of projects that I got involved with. Here's the UN Women's Peace Prize that was awarded in 2000. And I was very lucky to be able to have this great experience of being able to go all over the world and show these sculptures, exhibit in various places. I actually got to be the first American ever to be invited to exhibit in the Hermitage Museum, which is the biggest art museum in the world in St. Petersburg, Russia. And it's a kind of honor that I don't think I will ever be able to understand. It's just so amazing to have that kind of experience. And I got to go to Russia a couple times, and gosh, I got treated like a superstar over there. But then I quickly realized that having kind of reached that pinnacle of success and notoriety, that wasn't really what made me happy. And I'm trying to get rid of, there we go. Let me stop this. Did I stop my screen share for you?
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
you.
Okay. Here we are. We're living in this society that really exhibits values that I disagree with. We inhabit this very materialistic culture that has grown out of what I think was a more community-oriented, spiritually grounded kind of community that we had, or the civilization that we had for most of the last 2,000 years. And of course, there was a lot of violence and oppression and all kinds of things. But what I see happening in our time is a movement away from a focus on collectivity and more toward just individual, not even fulfillment, but individual gratification, maybe. And what's always struck me about the conflict between art and capitalism is that they really exhibit two opposing value systems. That the only thing that sells in a capitalist world is either entertainment or decoration. And true art that is moving to a human being, that is transformative, is not ever going to be a big part of the market. And although there are some pretty notable exceptions to that, we see that over time, the great art tends to float to the top as it gets more and more circulation among fans and so forth. The system itself does not promote good art. And I realized that from the very first. And what I intended to do with my life was to work against that that uphill climb, to try to live out my values despite the values of the capitalist world. And when I was just in college and graduated from college, I was making small welded sculptures that I would sell for maybe 25 or 50 bucks. And a friend of mine came up to me one day and said, you know, do you want me to help you try to sell these things? And I said, sure, knock yourself out. And this guy became my manager for many, many years. And he was the reason why I was able to have such great success, because I refused to do sales. I refused to say to somebody, I'm glad that you like my art, but I want you to pay a certain amount for it. It's kind of like my father was a Methodist pastor. And in fact, my brother is the sixth Methodist pastor in our family, sixth generation. And I thought that selling art is kind of like my dad being approached by somebody to say, oh, could you please pray for my dead husband or something like that? And he would say to her, oh, sure, I'll do that if you give me $100. It's just such a violation of the spirit of the gift. And to me, art is the same way. If I make a piece of art, it's an act of love. And so to ask for money for it is really kind of a violation of the spirit of the thing. And what I was able to do by having a manager is he did all the dirty work, and I got to work on making the art. He would figure out how to sell it. And he did very, very well. And I was able to buy a house and a few buildings. I ended up buying 3 houses and a studio. And I'll share this screen again if I can figure it out. So I was able to produce quite a bit of kind of material success for me and my family. I put 4 people through college, you know, and after a couple of decades, I lost my manager, and I found another one with a great deal of difficulty. I found another person who could do that for me, and for another 5 years, I sold more work. But then what I realized was, you know, selling art is not what feeds my soul. What really feeds me is producing the work and being involved in the world and trying to make an impact in the places where I can. Part of my joy comes from being able to enter into a kind of relationship with the world that would allow me to live in this really conflicted relationship with capitalism. So in the late 80s, being so frustrated with that conflict, what I ended up doing was, along with my sister, I kind of invented my own religion and created a kind of monastic order that would allow me to continue doing this work in spite of the values of capitalism. So we together created something we call the Benedictine order, which is based on the same vows as the monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And what that has to do with is my dedication to the creative muse that runs my life and inspires all of my art. And so part of that is poverty. Now, I was married at the time and I had 3 boys, and it was really hard for me to ask my family to live in poverty, but I was able to somehow make that work for myself. I tried to live in a really non-materialistic way as much as I could while still taking care of my family. And it's interesting to look back at my education, because after I graduated from college, I went to art school in London. And one of the things I really wanted to learn had to do with the lifestyle of the artist. It's very apparent through history that artists have been, for the most part, not supported. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think that 100 years ago, there were 2 or 3 professional poets in the whole country of the US, 2 or 3 that were able to make their living at it. It's just astonishing to me. And now we look around us and we see there are actually thousands and thousands of artists who are able to make a living, and that's really great. But the conflict with that value system is still there. So what I wanted to do when I went to art school was learn how to live on next to nothing, because I knew if I could survive on very little, I would be able to be a person who is hard to kill by the capitalist world. So what I did in London was I lived in an abandoned house. I scrounged dumpsters for furniture. I rode my bicycle through a vegetable market at night after school, and sometimes I would see vegetables in the street and I'd pick them up and clean them off and eat what was good. So I really got a immersed sense of what it's like to live on nothing. And later in life, that lesson proved to be really valuable for me. So let me show you my studio here. This is a building that I bought in 1990 with the help of my manager. I got this building for $7,000. It's a 7,000 square foot building. I know, not 7,000, $16,000, 7,000 square feet. And it was just a wreck. You can see on the left here is what it looked like when I got it. It was a furniture warehouse. And I transformed it into a studio over the next few years. This is what it looks like now. This is the kind of the front room, the gallery. And there are there's a few videos online that offer a tour of the studio, which is a really amazing place. It was built in 1890 as a home for wayward women. And a lot of the original architecture and the wallpaper and woodwork is still there. It's really cool. But what I did here was I recycled an old building. And this is very much the kind of attitude I have to my whole life. A lot of the furniture in this building is just scrounged. I hardly buy anything new at all. I drive a car that's 30 years old that I gave to my first son, and he crashed it and gave it back. And I fixed it and gave it to my third son. He crashed it and gave it back, and I'm still driving it. So this is just a reflection of the fact that what is really important in my life is art and relationships and community. And all of those things are free. And of course, all of us have to make a living. We have to figure out how to survive in the world. But while I used to tell students, art students, that you can do what I did. You can work really hard and make some kind of a success if you're lucky. Nowadays, what I tell art students is be really careful to make a distinction between two things. One is making a living. So find a thing that can pay you money so you can survive and put a roof over your head. And the second thing is make a life. And that is devote yourself to something that really gives your life meaning. And over the last 15 years, what I have done is adopted a lifestyle that I call downwardly mobile. So I intentionally tried to make less and less money every year and to be happier. And I'm pleased to report that I've had a great deal of success. So about 5 years ago, I kind of hit the bottom when it comes to making money, because it turns out that there is a limit to the amount of money that I cannot make. I realized that I still have to sell art in a market that looks at free things as being worthless. If you think about it, if you win a cruise, most of us realize that what you've won is actually fairly worthless. I mean, yeah, you can go on a cruise, but you're going to end up paying a lot of things that you didn't realize up front. And so if I give art away, it has the danger of being seen as worthless. Nevertheless, I started a project a few years ago with a buddy of mine who is a brilliant speaker and was traveling all over the world speaking. He wasn't even 30 years old when I met with him one day, and he said, "Oh, I'm so tired of traveling." And I said, "How can you be tired of traveling? The world is full of wonder." And he said, "Oh, every airport and every hotel looks the same." And, I certainly understand what he was talking about. So I grabbed a handful of drawings. I said, next time you go on a trip, take these drawings, and your assignment is to pass them out to strangers. Don't ask for anything in return, and give me a report when you come back. So he came back from his trip and he said, "Wow, that absolutely transformed the way I travel." He said, "Before I was just barreling through the airport, trying to get to my gate, just trying to ignore people. And all of a sudden I'm looking around thinking, who can I give a drawing to?" So he had this wonderful experience. He started making speeches about it. Then he wrote a book called Random Gifts of Art. And I illustrated the book. And then that prompted one thing and another, and we ended up doing a TV show. We did a TED Talk. We did a live performance about reaching out to strangers. It was kind of a comedy show. And later on, we did a tour of Europe, a couple of tours of Europe with our comedy show. All the time giving away art and reaching out to people and being sort of a defiant, defying the capitalist assumption that we all have to get paid for what we do. So I can give you links for all of these things so you can see what we're talking about here. But what I was able to do over the last few years is I pared down my life so that I live on fumes, basically. I spend very, very little money. Unfortunately, I don't have a mortgage anymore. My biggest expense is taxes and insurance on buildings. But people still come by and want to buy my art. And so I have to participate in the system. What I usually do is I'll give them some kind of a price, a price that seems like it is reasonable in the market. But then I'll usually say, well, I'll give you a discount because you live in Montana, or your name starts with H, or I like your color of your hair, or whatever. So there's kind of a minimum that I can, a minimum level that I can not make, as I said before. And it's way under the poverty line. So I haven't paid taxes in several years on my income. But at the same time, as I said before, I'm making less and less money, and I'm happier every year. And I think this is the kind of thing that most of us have the capacity to do. And of course, we have things like mortgages we have to pay, and car payments and that kind of thing. But I'm really trying to refine a life that is about community, about relationships, and about sharing beautiful things. And so for me, in my art has transformed from making objects into more of sharing community and opening up new ideas, like this Random Gifts of Art project. So I'll share this again. Here's a piece that I did during 2020, the COVID year, when all of us were isolated in our own apartments. I was in my studio, and I made this sculpture. It's about 4 feet high. It has 26 figures in it. This is called Awakened Human. And very, very few people have seen the actual work because it's very fragile. It's made out of mostly wood, plaster, and wax. And many of the projects I'm involved now are projects that have to do with opening up the society, bringing questions into the community. So for instance, I helped put together with a team of about 6 other people around the country, kind of a symposium this summer at my studio, where we invited people from all over the country and a couple of other countries to come to my studio to talk about what is it that needs to be awakened in your own life. And this is a lot of artists and psychologists and creative thinkers who came together to talk about how can we create a forward-looking, responsive culture that is not suicidal, that instead of just driving ourselves into the ground, which it feels like we're trying to do with our civilization, we can respond to the world and its problems and the people and what the people need and what we ourselves need to live a more healthy and vibrant life. Here's a couple of the paintings that I do. I wanted to show you this one. This was created for this symposium called Confluence 22. The sculpture is entitled The Water Bearer, and it's about the coming of the Aquarian Age. And this is an image of an older woman with a jar of water on her shoulder, pouring the water into the bowl held by this figure on the left, who's a young man on his knees. And this is the rising of the feminine qualities of relationship and nurture. This was the theme of our confluence this summer, and we're going to do another one next fall in California, the Confluence 23, and that one will be on the theme of the rising feminine. So I've gone over my time, but let me just say I really appreciate your listening to my stammering about trying to figure out how to talk about the weird life that I live. But I wonder if anybody has questions.